So time to show the Imperium, Chaos Boys and the other Xenos who's boss. The Orks are finally here, so let's talk through their entire index in 10th edition Warhammer 40k. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking through new index Orks and all the fun and fancy ways that you can use your greenskins to beat the living snot out of the enemy. There's some really good fun stuff here in the rules and plenty of violence, so let's talk through every single rule in the index and every single unit and datasheet. In Index Orks, we've got the same as the other armies get. The big faction rule, which is Waaagh, a one-turn buff which makes you stronger, tougher and faster. The launch detachment is called the Waaagh Tribe, basically feels like a fairly Goths-themed detachment to me. The detachment rule is Get Stuck In for extra violence in combat, and I've got a selection of stratagems that I'd say are more skewed towards melee orcs than any other build. I've got 4 enhancements for making your boss better, and then new rules and updated datasheets for all the greenskins in the army. There's 57 datasheets here, the entire plastic line of the army plus I guess tank busters, but there's not Forge World stuff here, that'll be along in the Index Imperial armour. At time of recording we're still waiting on points costs, but we can certainly get a good feel of the army and how the units fit together and what sort of stats and things have changed since 9th. First up, let's start strong with the army rule. The Orcs get the reincarnation of their Waaagh rule, a bit of a simplified form since their 9th edition version where it depended as to whether you were using a speed boss or a regular war boss to declare the Waaagh, and then you'd either get benefits based on your vehicles or your foot troops. Now though the rule is a little bit more simplified, you don't actually need a war boss anymore, so you could have a big mech leading your force, which I think is a little bit more freeing for army construction. And now they have basically chopped out the speed war, it means that the faction rule broadly focuses around melee orcs, though the invul save will be quite nice against range damage for bikes and buggies and things. Previously it was also a 2-turn buff. All the main advantages were on the first turn, but it still gave you a little bit of combat boost in the second one. Now it is just literally an advantage that applies to one battle round. You only get one boost in that turn of the game, though the advantages are rather good. It does seem that you do have to call it at the start of the battle round, which I think has some positives and negatives. On the plus side, if you desperately needed to prevent a turn of your opponent shooting, then you could activate the invulnerable saves early. That could really help a few more boys survive to get stuck into combat, though it does have the downside that if you declare the Waaagh in your opponent's turn, they basically know that it's coming, and they might be able to just plan a little bit accordingly for the prospect of very, very long greenskin charges. There might only be so much they can do for it, but it stops them getting so much, I suppose. The buffs that you get for the Waaagh are threefold, and they're basically absolutely amazing when combined. First up, everything in your army gets advance and charge. It's not just core units anymore, literally everything. Really quite a massive increase to threat range. Between this and charging, you'd average your movement characteristic plus around about 10 or 11 inches, which is really rather nice. Now your standard Orc boys have gone up to a 6-inch movement. It means that their average charge threat range is around about 16 or 17 inches with the Waaagh, really quite a long way for just boys on foot. Storm boys can certainly go much faster. Then when you actually get to combat, you get +1 strength and +1 attack, a very solid melee damage boost there. The +1 attack is going to be relevant against everything, the +1 strength a bit more variable depending on the opponent's toughness. Still very handy though, say if you had strength 4 choppers going up to strength 5, you could be wounding Space Marines on 3s. Then finally and certainly not least, you get a 5+ invulnerable save for your entire army. Really quite a nice defensive boost, seeing as quite a lot of Orky saves aren't quite so strong. That's definitely going to add up to a fair few more Orcs surviving the enemy attacks. Might just be a little bit less relevant on vehicles with things like 3+ saves, as there's quite a lot of lower AP weapons in 10th edition. Vehicles in general seem to get a 6+ invulnerable save as well from the new version of the Ramshackle rule, so a 5+ invulnerable save is maybe just a little bit less overwhelming on those. Still though, it's a very nice benefit, extra durability, and then extra speed and melee damage. I do think it just doesn't really help out things that want to shoot quite so much though hopefully points cost will reflect that, and it'll still mean that shooting units can be good in Orcs. For calling it, I guess turn 2 would probably be a good time, not too early in the game, but also not too late. In general, you want to activate it at least somewhat early, so the big swing can go in your favour early, and then dictate the rest of the game because your opponent's already lost key units or something. A turn 1 Waaagh might be a little bit on the early side, your opponent might just have the distance to try and keep back and still keep themselves safe from it. Overall, it's definitely a massively powerful boost. Orcs going to be a slightly weird army, just being enormously strong on one turn and a bit more mediocre on the others. The Orky launch detachment is called the Waaagh Tribe. This one's special rule is called Get Stuck In, and it's basically just a flat melee boost to the entire Orc army. This rule just simply gives you the sustained hits 1 rule on all of your melee attacks, extra hits on 6s, so usually going to be a +25% increase to your damage against any target that you might want to try and hit. Again, really going down the full melee theme for Orks at the start of the edition. Seems hard to imagine that both with Waaagh and with this, that combat armies aren't going to kind of dominate. Definitely feels like a nice rule though, very goths, hard to go too far wrong with extra melee damage when you've got lots of nice violent Ork units, and it's perhaps particularly relevant on things that don't hit on a particularly high value, like Mega Knobs that hit on 4s. Seems solid, and there's a few ways out there to get critical hits on 5s rather than 6s as well, so that can mean that your exploding hits to go off a bit easier. Moving on to stratagems, and first up we have Kareen. This one I think is starting off with a little bit of a dud one perhaps. It's definitely not a bad stratagem, but it's just super situational. It only matters if you've got an Ork vehicle that rolls a 6 on its deadly demise table and goes on to explode. If it does, then the vehicle in question gets to do a normal move to try and get the explosion into the enemy or away from your own troops, and it's perhaps particularly useful for transported units as well. If say a battle wagon goes pop and they've got a whole bunch of mega knobs inside, you could move the transport and then try and get it somewhere else useful on the board, maybe get those mega knobs out into cover or out of line of sight, or right up in the opponent's face. Kind of cool when the explosion does happen, but might not always be worth using even then, and it is a bit on the situational side, as you might just not roll explosions all game long. Unbridled Carnage though looks very easy to use. This one's just a nice easy boost to your melee damage, one command point for your unit in combat, and any 5 pluses to hit gain a critical hit against the enemy. The main advantage to that is to get your exploding 6s to go off on exploding 5s instead. Usually that's going to equate to a plus 20% damage increase compared with normal boys who already have the sustained hits on 6s, a bit more meaningful with a 25% increase if you are hitting on 4s. This one is super powerful though if you've also got lethal hits going on as well, and you can get this in melee in a couple of places, though it's kind of rare. Ghazghkull Thraka can grant it to nearby Orks, as can the Kill Rig. If you have boosted critical hits on both lethal and sustained, then that seems very good value to me. Next, for 2 command points, we've got Orks is Never Beaten. This one fights in death, and you get to choose to use this when you're selected as the target of a melee attack by the enemy. Quite a lot of armies in Warhammer 40k seem to have this one. It is really quite a nice reactive stratagem to make sure that your unit will get to fight before they die. Maybe just a little bit unfortunate that you have to commit to it before you know whether any of your models will actually live or die or not. Though I guess if they do unexpectedly live, you'll still get to strike with them. Quite nice to guarantee some melee, but is pricey. For 1 command point, Ours as Nails is nice and simple. This one's -1 to wound for something that isn't either a vehicle or a Gretchen. You can use this one either in the shooting or the fight phase, and it's basically just guarantees to make your unit a fair bit tougher against enemy attacks. This one's particularly powerful if they are wounding you on a 5+, and it flips it up to a 6. I'd say potentially one of the most powerful things that you could use this on might be the Beast Boss on a Squigosaur. That one's a crazy toughness 10 now, and can be fired at by direct enemy anti-tank shooting. It's already very tanky, so giving it -1 to wound seems great. Next up, for 1 command point, we've got Mob Rule. This one again I think is perhaps depressingly niche. It basically allows stratagems on battle-shocked units within 6 inches for a 10-strong Ork mob. This one feels like it's a little bit overkill really, basically spending a command point to negate battle shock just in terms of stratagems and nothing else. And for some reason it only allows you to use stratagems on it until the end of the phase. I really don't know if I'm missing anything there, but a stratagem that allows you to target a mob with stratagems in the command phase, that just doesn't really sound like it's going to do much. You can already use the Insane Bravery stratagem in the command phase, even if you're battle shocked. Even if they meant that you could still target the infantry unit with stratagems all the way until the next command phase, I still think that would be kind of weak. Let me know if you can spot the use of this one, and I'll update it in a pinned comment below. Otherwise, as far as I can tell, it's basically 1 out of 6 stratagems that basically does nothing. Finally, for 1 command point, we've got Here We Go. This one's used at the start of your movement phase, and it gives you +2 to advance and charge rolls made for your units. Pretty excellent if you've got a squad that needs to make really quite a long charge, and because Waaagh gets you to advance and charge, this one just becomes absolutely excellent in the turn of the Waaagh, giving you an extra 4 inches worth of threat range, those Orks on foot going up to an average of 20-inch charges. If you're Storm Boys, I guess that would go up to a 26 inches, pretty massive. Overall, I feel like these Ork stratagems are kind of hit and miss. Mob Rule and Kareen I feel like aren't going to have the biggest impact, whereas Hard as Nails, the melee buff one, and Here We Go I think are all very usable. And Fighting on Death is nice enough to access, though it does cost a fair few CP. I guess for stratagems, Overwatch might also not be the worst for Orks. Compared with most armies, hitting on 6s isn't actually as bad of a damage debuff for Orks as quite a few others, so that could be a little bit higher value for big efficient Ork shooting units. I feel like the stratagems maybe aren't the main strength of the faction though, they will add a little bit of power. Next up, we've got enhancements for the bosses. The first one is Follow Me Lads. This one gives us a plus 2-inch movement for your unit. Along with Waaagh and that plus 2 move and charge one, this one seems to be another rule that adds Orky melee threat range. I guess if we're putting super speedy Orc combo together, that's now 22 inches for your average charge threat for your Orc boys. Pretty handy full stop though for any combat unit. Getting them closer to the enemy or just being able to reach objectives and cover more reliably, both of those are very nice to have. Still though, I hope it'd be kind of cheap. 2-inch move, while good, isn't everything. Ed Whopper's Kill Chopper gives you devastating wounds for your melee attacks. Usually that's going to be a Power Claw or Big Chopper. The boss weapons tend to have damage too. Definitely nice to have against higher save or higher invulnerable save targets, though again maybe not the hugest damage buff in the world. It's quite away from the Killer Claw with a big damage 3 and all the wound rerolls and everything that we had last time round. Then we've got Cunning but Brutal. This one gives your Orc unit fallback, shoot and charge. Definitely nice enough, but maybe one that you might not ideally want to commit to pre-game, I guess. I feel like this one might actually be best used on a big squad of something that has got some powerful guns. Perhaps something like a big mech with shock attack gun leading a squad of looters or something. If the enemy manages to tag them, then they won't lock up their fire. Again though, that does tend to be the kind of rule that tends to be a little bit better on stratagems, as you just won't need it very often. Finally, we've got a personal durability buff for the boss. The Super Cyborg body is back with a 4+ feel no pain type save. Really quite excellent in terms of making your model tougher, but perhaps the slightly frustrating thing about this one is that the things that really want it kind of already get feel no pains. The beast boss on the Squigasaur already gets this exact rule, so you can't stack 2 of them. The Mega Armoured War Boss might be your next choice for it. He already gets a 4+ feel no pain in the Waaagh turn, though it would make him tougher elsewhere. And even the Death Killer War Trike already has a 5+ feel no pain as well. So again, for that one, you're not amping up the durability by as much as you might think. I guess realistically, after all that, it might be worth just being on one of the more minor support characters, maybe something like a Big Mech in Mega Armor perhaps, or perhaps just a standard War Boss. Overall, I'd say maybe not my favourite set of enhancements that we've seen in 10th edition so far, definitely not quite as powerful as the Necron ones that I looked at earlier in the day. I'd say all of them seem fine, though not really auto-include. I'd hope that they'd be all at least somewhat cheap to justify their inclusion. None of them really hurt though. Maybe the plus 2-inch move might genuinely be one of the better ones. Making the difference between a charge and not doing so is huge for Orcs. Otherwise, extra melee damage, fallback and shoot and charge shenanigans, and extra tankiness all are kind of fine as well. Overall, for the detachment, I maybe feel that the power that you get from it is maybe a bit more slanted in terms of the actual damage dealing rule in melee. The sustained hits is very nice, and you will just have that all the time. A bunch of the stratagems are usable, but not maybe as enormously high yield as some of the others in 10th. I'd say the enhancements feel merely okay. Still though, definitely between the damage dealing and Waaagh, you've set yourself up for a big scary and very violent greenskin force. That's the majority of the main rules for Orcs in 10th edition, so let's talk about the changes to their datasheets. Just for a bit of an intro before we get into things, Battleline Units and Index Orcs are boys and beast snagger boys. Gretchen are not on this list unfortunately, so I guess you're limited to a maximum of 60 grots now. But you can still take a very hefty number of boys. I guess that's up to 240 of them with the maximum squad sizes now. Definitely more than enough to field a massive great big green tide. Otherwise, like a few indexes in 10th edition, a few datasheets have gone absent. For the Orcs, there's nothing really missing too much. Even things that Games Workshop has on range rotation at the moment, like Mad Dog Grotsnicker here, there's just a few models that have been more folded inside other datasheets, namely the Bonebreaker and Gun Wagon, which I guess just are represented by the standard Battle Wagon now. Kind of weird seeing as they've actually separated out other datasheets for certain armies. Say for example the Guard have like 7 types of Rust now, all just with their different weapons to access a different datasheet rule. Kind of weird when they've done things like that. They've also decided to consolidate Orky profiles that used to be different units. Does mean that you're limited to 3 battle wagons maximum now, I suppose. Otherwise, Runt herds got rolled into Gretchen units, they're all just one squad now, and Makari's attached to Gazgul's datasheet. You're no longer able to field him on his own, and if you're fielding Gazgul, you have to field Makari. Otherwise, worth noting that no datasheets are clan locked at all. In the last Codex Orcs, you could only field certain characters if you were fielding one certain clan, say for example Snakebites and Mosrog Scragbat. Unlike Space Marines, whose special characters don't want to get on, in Orcs the clans can somewhat work together, I suppose, so you can have a whole different collection of different Orky special characters, all fighting together in the same force should you want to. Kind of nice that nothing gets locked out, or just flat out overshadowed because you wanted to take a different fun special character. Finally, before we actually get into the datasheets, here's just a few common themes that I noticed on the read through of the datasheets. Orks in general retained their 9th edition toughness of 5, seems that's not going away anytime soon, so it's still perhaps abnormally durable against bolter rounds compared with what they used to be in the past. And unlike a few other factions that don't have a different datasheet profile for their squad sergeants, Orks have retained a different profile for their nob leaders, they still get 2 wounds. Orks seem to have better armour than they did before as well, a save of 5 plus even for the basic boys now. They might be wearing t-shirts, but I suppose bullets might struggle to penetrate through all that muscle. I feel like a 5 plus save is really nice to have in 10th edition when there's light cover in quite a lot of places and lots of AP has been toned down. The ramshackle rule seems broadly gone on vehicles. Previously this was -1 damage against anything that was strength 7 or below, so it helped protect against small shots from taking down your tanks. Now though, as best I can tell, they've decided to replace this by a 6 plus invulnerable save on most Orky vehicles. Perhaps more relevant for some than others, the ones with bad saves tend to profit the most from that. I guess it's quite helpful to have on things like mech guns that only have a 5 plus save anyway. The beast snagger rules in the book have also seen a bit of a shift. They previously had invulnerable saves on them, but they've lost theirs in favour of a feel no pain. Seems that most of the beast snagger units do have a feel no pain, the standard boys have a 6 plus, and it goes all the way up to a 4 plus on that great big beast boss on Squigosaur, much to the envious looks of the Death Guard players no doubt. As you'd expect, they also have a lot of attacks that seem to do a bit better against vehicles and monsters. Quite a lot of their combat attacks have the anti-vehicle and anti-monster special rules, often on a 4 plus. Finally, greenskin charges are just going to be a little bit less reliable than they were before. They lost the here we go rule to reroll charges innately. That one just seems to have gone. Definitely going to make them a bit less reliable at making longer charges, and also kind of bad news for anything trying to charge out of deep strike as well. It might mean that you actually have to spend more command points there if you want to have maximal chance of success. Overall, a few shifts there. I feel like losing the reroll charges is a bit of a blow, but 5 plus save boys is really quite nice, and Beast Snagger feel no pain seems quite good as well. Starting out with the datasheets, let's talk through the Battleline Units first. We've got boys and Beast Snagger boys here. We'll also talk about Gretchen, and then we'll move on to the other Orky Elite squads. For the standard boys, they've been toned down in squad size to a maximum of 20 models now, like the Beast Snaggers. This seems to be a bit of a design tenet of 10th edition. No squad so far gets more than 20 models, though you can go a little bit higher with attached units. Boys in particular having a rule where if they have a starting strength of 20, you can attach 2 different leader units to them instead of 1. One of them has to be a war boss model, but beside that you've got really quite a lot of choices, as we'll talk about with the characters. Otherwise, as mentioned, that 5 plus save will be very nice, very worth getting them cover if you can now, and they've also been upgraded to get a 6-inch move as well, definitely a lot nicer than the 5-inch that they had before, and that was kind of painful for melee troops. Weapons wise, their choppers retain AP -1 despite quite a lot of other combat weapons in the game having AP toned down, so that's a bit of a win there. Big choppers are broadly the same as they were before, and claws have had a slight shift with strength 9 and only AP -2 but damage 2, and they also have -1 to hit as well. I feel like maybe they're a little bit better balanced with big choppers. I'd say probably the claw still wins out though by a small amount. It seems the Ork Daco rule is kind of alive and well. As I suspected when the 10th edition rules came out for rapid fire, I did think that this would be the way that they realised Daco weapons. They're still a 3-shot gun with rapid fire 2 at 18 inches, so it basically means that they don't have to flat out double their damage when they're up close. The combi weapons I think are probably a fair bit worse. You no longer get combi rockets or combi scorchers and things. They're just the weird sort of anti-infantry devastating wounds profile that the Space Marines have, and I feel like with Orky ballistic skill that is super underwhelming. I can't really see many people picking those up unless they're completely free on a model that you're all going to take anyway. I do quite like the change to rockets though as well. They previously were a heavy weapon that was kind of annoying for them. Now they just move and shoot normally again. D3 shots and 10th edition version of Blast, which is actually pretty savage against hordes, hitting on 5s all the time at strength 9, AP 2 and damage 3. I guess perhaps a little bit potent against tanks, seeing as they didn't have their strength go up, but at least they won't be hitting on 6s all the time now with the heavy keyword. Finally, their special rule is a bit of a niche one I think. Breaking heads means that if a war boss is in the unit, he basically gets to kill one of the bulk boys, and if you do so, then you get to re-roll a failed battle shock test. It's definitely handy, and with objective control too, they are the sort of unit that you just want on the objectives and you don't want failing those tests, but it still seems a bit weird that their main special rule is purely revolving around a war boss who might not be in every single unit. Still though, I think looks solid enough. I still think you're probably better off with choppers over shooters. Maybe just the special rule is one of the bigger disappointment things, but I feel like I can live with that for a 5 plus save and a boosted move. Their Savage Orc counterparts are the Beast Snagger boys. These guys have seen similar sort of changes really. remaining at 10 to 20 models here, and they're just a slightly simpler datasheet, again the main difference between them being that they're a bit tougher and they have strength 5 rather than strength 4. The toughness boost, as mentioned, has swapped their invulnerable save for a 6+ feel no pain. Against small arms that is going to be better, as they've got the 5+ save now, means they get 2 saves rather than 1. But against things with decent AP and multi-damage, that'd basically be worse than having the invulnerable save, as it means that they'll go through the armor anyway. And if you find multi-damage into a feel no pain, it kind of gets negated on the 1 wound infantry models. Otherwise, the power snapper on the knob is basically a 4 attacks big chopper, so nice and generalist there, I suppose. And their special rule is monster hunters, reroll hit rolls that target monsters or vehicles, even if they still won't be all that effective against them. I guess it makes them into a bit more of a well-rounded and dangerous combat unit though. They're already going to be very efficient against lighter infantry with all those volume attacks. This will give them just a bit more threat against heavier things. I guess that'll work pretty well with the critical hit stratagem, and perhaps particularly so if Ghazghkull or the Killrig are nearby to give them lethal hits. Gretchen may not be battle line anymore, but I thought we'd cover them here anyway, as despite not being quite as spammable as they were, they still seem to be pretty excellent for objective work. Each little measly gross on an objective is still objective controlled too. That's more than I might have guessed really, given that they weren't even objective secured at base in the previous codex. Perhaps the biggest change to the Gretchen is that the run turds have been rolled into the unit. You now get units of either 11 or 22, and the run turd is part of them. The individual Gretchen are easier to kill though, they're only toughness 2 and have a 7+ save, so no save at all unless they're in cover. And while there's any Gretchen left, the run turd also counts as toughness 2 as well. The toughness 5 only becomes relevant if he's there on his own. Otherwise, they're not exactly going to do much with shooting or anything, a few grot blaster shots that might occasionally surprise you, and the run turd's melee profile has been consolidated into a grot smacker. 3 attacks at strength 5 and AP 0. It doesn't look like he does anything with his Squig Hound or anything else like that these days, but he does keep the unit supervised with a leadership of 7+, which is kind of weirdly the same as the rest of the boys, so Gretchen aren't really likely to run away any more than normal due to the Runturd's supervision. Besides the perhaps surprisingly high objective control though, the other really good thing that the Gretchen do is thieving scavengers. At the start of your command phase, you roll a d6 for each objective marker under your control that has 1 or more Gretchen units on it. If at least one of those dice is a 4+, then you generate 1 command point. I feel like basically for that reason alone, never mind the objective control, at least 1 unit of Gretchen seems basically auto-include. Plonk them on a home objective, and over the course of the game, hopefully they get you another 2 or 3 command points, or while doing exactly the sort of role that you'd want them to do, sit on the objective with good objective control, and allow your more valuable and deadly units to go after the enemy and take the others. Overall, still seems like a pretty excellent unit, to be honest. I guess might not necessarily be the worst idea to have a couple of Gretchen units on your objective though. That could just guard you against one of them failing an unlucky battle shock from some sort of enemy debuff. Otherwise, if you have more easy objectives that you could reach, you could try and make that command point farming a bit more reliable. Next up, we've got the Orks that get the job done fast. Storm Boys basically just remain just like regular boys but faster, a 12-inch movement jump pack unit with fly, and pretty much the same profile as standard boys with their choppers and the knob getting a power claw. They will like the 5+ save, though I did notice that their maximum mob size has dropped down from 15 models down to 10 maximum, so you can't spam quite as many of them if you want. Your maximum Storm Boy count would now cap out at 30. They have historically been an army that people could really spam to the maximum should they want to. I feel like their special rule might have arguably got a bit better. They basically have inbuilt advance and charge if you want to risk a few slain orcs, rolling 1d6 per each orc that tries to do so. On a 1 you take a mortal wound. The Waaagh cancels out this ability and basically stops it working, but you get advance and charge anyway, which is kind of better. I'd be kind of surprised if Storm Boys weren't a fairly relevant unit, really quite quick and gets that melee actually where it needs to be. If you use the Waaagh and use that stratagem for +2 to advance and charge, they could easily be charging one deployment zone to the next. Next up, we've got the Fancy Commandos with a nice new kill team kit. These guys still keep their main battlefield role, setting up in the midfield and holding down the points and threatening early charges, though I feel like their datasheet has taken a bit of a nerf in that they have to take 10 models in the unit, no more and no less, mirroring a couple of other changes to similar units that Games Workshop sells in 10s, like the Space Marine Tactical Squad. I feel that is a little bit on the unhelpful side for them. Really quite a lot of people liked fielding commandos and units of 5s. It's kind of what you want to do, to have a nice cheap unit just to be there and hold down that part of the midfield. Committing to a full 10 of them definitely was done quite a lot in Orcs list, particularly Goths trying to storm the opponent's deployment zone, but I feel like losing the option is a blow to them. Otherwise for changes, Stealth has replaced their bonus to saves in cover, -1 to hit rather than potential 3+ save Orcs. I think both of them are kind of reasonable to be honest, and they get the stealth even if they're not in cover, so I suppose that's something. At least they have a 5 plus save going to a 4 plus base if they are in cover. Otherwise, their combat weapons have got some fairly fun options, things like special commando shooters, burners, and rocket launchers built in, and I particularly quite like their breacher ram in combat. That one looks like it could be fun for an upgrade, only hitting on a 4 plus, but its attacks are at strength 9, AP 2, and damage 2, so it does punch quite hard. Seems that bomb squigs and the Ork Codex again work kind of similar to how they did before, a little bit simplified though. Just roll a dice and on a 2 plus you get D3 mortal wounds against one enemy unit that you've chosen within 12 inches. Nice and simple and effective extra threat there. Otherwise, for their other special rules, they've got immunity to Overwatch, really quite a relevant thing in 10th edition I think. A lot of armies are going to be going very heavy on that indeed. And I do quite like the new rules for that distraction grot. It gives the unit a 5 plus invulnerable save versus a shooting attack once per game, so I guess you could technically have that 2 times in a row if you had that one turn and then used the Waaagh. Overall still seems like a fun and capable unit. I guess you'd really have to justify them as actual threatening damage dealers now though, as small infiltrating disruption squads are off the cards I guess. Next we've got the Tank Busters, 5 model units only now, and again like the Commandos, these guys have really had their options locked down. It really just reflects the single fine cast kit that Games Workshop sells for them. These guys are in desperate need of their own plastic box set I think. The weapons are also locked as well, which I think is maybe a tiny bit unhelpful, as you might just want to spam rockets. You get that pair of rocket pistols, which is now a single shot at strength 7, AP -1, damage D3 and twin links, and then one of them has to take the Tank Buster, 2 shots at strength 7, AP -1 and damage D3 again, anti-vehicle 4 plus, devastating wounds, and now it swaps the kind of auto-death type thing for hazardous, which I guess is an improvement. I guess somehow the Ork can manage to swing that rocket on a stick and not wind up dead now. Otherwise they mainly get that new rocket profile, which I think is kind of helpful for moving and shooting, plus 10th edition blast. Their special rule is a +1 to hit and wound vehicles, so you're going to be wounding most things in the game on a 4 plus there, very nice indeed. And the squad also comes with 2 bomb squigs built in as well, you get them all the time, so you might well get 2 turns worth of mortal wounds if they survive to deploy the second. Overall they still seem to be pretty interesting for doing their intended role I think, just maybe a bit of a shame that you can't get more rockets in the squad. Looters I feel like maybe haven't come out amazingly out of the changes here. Their def guns are kind of similar to how they were before, 2 shots to 48 inches and an extra one to 24. It does appear that they've gained the heavy keyword though and hit on 6s if they move around now. I feel like that probably outweighs the strength of 8 that they have. They really do need to be sitting still now, and that can often be a problem if they're out in the open and taking enemy damage. Might be interesting enough in something like a battle wagon to use as a bunker, or even a big Ed Boss bunker. I feel like they just want to be sat around and shooting all game long. Interestingly enough though, I feel like the mandatory spanner in the squad with the custom Mega Blaster I feel like has gone from one of the weaker models in the units to perhaps one of the best. He gets 3 shots at to 24 inches, strength 9, AP -2 and damage D6, quite a lot more of an exciting profile than the death guns are now. You also get a rather nasty damage boost against units on objectives as well, which I think is genuinely quite nice. You get to reroll once to wound against everything, but you also get to reroll all wound rolls against units on objectives, and in general the opponent will be wanting to put units on objectives as they need to score points. If they can get those guns chugging away and getting those full wound rerolls, they seem pretty fine. Realistically though, I feel like that move and shoot penalty is a bit killer for them. Next up we've got the dual build option in the burner boys, 1 spanner and 4 burners, again gains the nice Orky 6-inch move and 5 plus save, both of which I think will be relevant for close range shooting. I feel like burners will be interesting enough in 10th edition. They now ignore cover now, which they didn't before, and they'll absolutely love the new Overwatch when you get to fire it, potentially up to 12d6 flamer shots in one unit if your opponent dares to stray too close. In combat, their cut-into flames are now mercifully no longer a stratagem, they just get AP -2 melee all the time, but only 2 attacks. It does mean that they kind of hold their own against boys, at least on a per model basis I suppose. Their special rule is Pyromaniacs. Within half range they get to reroll a wound roll of 1, and again they quite like clearing objectives apparently, as if they're within half range of a unit that's on an objective marker, he gets 2 fully reroll wound rolls. I believe that won't be possible to do if you're inside a transport, as I think with the firing deck rules, the weapons count as mounted on the transports and not fired on the squads. So if you actually want to trigger this rule in a big burning drive-by, you would need to use the transport rule to get the burners out of the transport. Otherwise though, they can absolutely blaze away from within it, they just wouldn't be getting their rerolls. Overall, I still think they could be interesting enough, obviously points dependent though. I feel like they can't be too expensive, seeing as they don't have the biggest threat in the world against armour. Flash kits broadly haven't changed too much, their snazgun profile has just been altered a little bit though, but I'd say it mainly has the same sort of look and feel. You still have basically 5 plus ballistic skill if you're on the move, and 4 plus if you're standing still. Their attacks land at strength 6, AP minus 1 and damage 2, so lost a bit of AP there, but picked up a few other fun special rules. Sustained hits 1, if you fire at the nearest enemy then you get 4 shots not 3, and once per game they can go into rage mode with some fancy ammo, and use their ammo runs to give them lethal hits for a turn. Quite a nice way to punch up against harder stuff, I guess. Overall still seem usable enough, general purpose snaz guns that can blow away quite a lot of enemy infantry, though still will probably struggle against armour. I feel like Captain Badrock has actually become a fairly interesting choice for them, as we'll see in the HQ section, he can allow some big full rerolls to hit. Next up, the Orc Nob Squad is back. They've had their war gear simplified a bit, I'm afraid. Basically, these guys just get either a Power Claw, Combi Weapon, or Big Chopper now. There's no option for taking choppers, dual or otherwise. I think for most people they were generally upgraded into one of the exciting melee weapons though, so maybe not the most has changed there. I still think they'll do their job as a good Orky melee elite unit, with a whole bunch of damage to attacks when they jump out of a truck or a wagon or something. Otherwise, similar sort of stat line and weapon changes to the other units. The Power Claws hit on 4s and Strength 9 and damage 2. The Choppers on 3s at Strength 7, AP 1, damage 2. And particularly when you're giving up those excellent melee weapons, the combi weapon is looking very bad indeed, I think, unless it happens to cost a significant amount less. Their special rule is called the Dabos's Lads. When a warboss is leading the unit, when an enemy attack targets them, they get -1 to the wound roll to that, so it makes them really quite a lot tougher with their decent enough toughness of 5. I feel like between them and the boys they'll all be fighting on having the war bosses in their units, both of their special rules revolve around that. Seems decent enough though, and as with the flash kits, the ammo run gives them a lethal hits on their shooting attacks once per game. I feel like that doesn't even work particularly well with the combi weapons though, as any lethal hits stop you from getting mortal wounds. They definitely look like a lot more of a melee squad compared with a ranged one. The other flavour of knobs that you can field are the Mega Knobs. These Orky Terminator elites have gone up to toughness 6, perhaps mirroring the changes to things like Space Marine and Death Guard Terminators. It's kind of interesting that you can field them in units of 2 now, it would seem. Looks like the minimum size squad has gone down to reflect what you can do with the big mech. I guess that's helpful enough if you've got a box of Mega Knobs, build 2 of them up as regular knobs and 1 as the main mech. The Power Claws and the Kill Saws look really quite a lot better balanced than they were. The Power Claws are Strength 9 and AP -2, the Kill Saws Strength 12 and AP 3, but the Power Claws get 3 attacks and the Kill Saws get 2. Overall I feel like that might still be a slight win for the Power Claws, though the dual Kill Saw option is kind of interesting. Trade out your custom shooter with its flurry of Strength 4 shots, and instead your Kill Saws get the Twin Links rule, meaning that they'll be extra nice at cutting through heavy armour. Their special rule is called Crump in Time. That one gives them devastating wounds on the turn where you call the Waaagh, so they're extra dangerous there, even on top of the other Waaagh melee buffs. Again, I feel like they're a unit that quite wants to have a war boss in them. Hitting on a 3+ rather than a 4 does seem kind of nice. Next up, let's move on to Orc mounted units. First up, we've got the War Bikers, down to a squad of 3 to 6 from their squad of 9 that they had before. As with most bikers in the game, they've dropped down from 14 inches to 12 inches, and they've also lost the auto advance 6 inches that a bunch of bikes had previously. Otherwise, they've got objective control too, so maybe a little bit more threatening on objectives than most. Mounted units in general seem to have that. Their durability has had a bit of a side grade. They've got a 6+ invulnerable save and toughness 6, but no longer get a -1 to hit. I think the 6+ invulnerable save is perhaps more due to their ramshackle bikes, perhaps. That does seem to be the common thing for any of the Orky vehicles. In combat, they basically punch like normal boys. 3 attacks with a strength 4 and AP -1 chopper. The knob can take a power claw. And then in the shooting phase, they kick out a fair amount of Daka. The twin Daka gun does look like it's maybe been toned down a little bit, perhaps. The same sort of profile as the big shooter, but trades the double shots for the twin links rule. It does still have assault though, which means that you can advance and shoot it. That's quite nice if you're in the Waaagh, I suppose. And they do still have an option to pick up a little bit of AP. If you can get them within 9 inches of the enemy, then not only do you get the extra shots, but you also get AP -1 on those shots as well. A lot better at clearing out hordes and chinking some wounds off heavies. I feel like they're still a unit that'll have a fair bit of competition, definitely competing against units like Deathcopters and Squighog Boys, and also perhaps things like Storm Boys as well for units that move fast and are sort of good against infantry. The Deathcopters have 3 to 6 models in the squad. They move 12 inches and have a 4+ save. Again, they've gone up to a toughness of 6, so are just a little bit harder to wound. I'd bear in mind that for the 10th edition fly rules, the fly will be a little bit less relevant on them. Fly doesn't allow you just to pass straight through ruined walls and things now, as it kind of did in 9th edition. Unless the terrain piece is very short and you can afford to go over, it's just not going to help out quite as much with terrain. Otherwise, for their stat line, the copter rockets have maybe been toned down a little bit. They do get the twin links rule as opposed to double the shots, which is generally worse. Though again, as with other rockets, being able to get more shots with the blast rule is kind of nice. In melee, their spinning blades have lost a bit of AP and won't be quite as strong with the Waaagh. They just get flat 6 attacks rather than 1 attack and tripling it to 3. Finally, they sort of have a flyby type rule where if they move over something, they get a death from above attack. For each copter that you have, roll a dice. On a 4+, you deal a mortal wound to the enemy as you drive by them. Overall, I feel like they're a little bit toned down compared with what they were before. Maybe that'll be reflected by a points cut, perhaps. They've also traded the -1 damage from Ramshackle for a 6+ invul save. Again, I feel like that might make them a little bit less durable, particularly against low strength damage 2 things. Lastly, for the Ork mounted units, we've got the Squighog boys, 3 to 6 models in the squad, and a profile again that's fairly similar to previously, slightly boosted toughness to toughness 7, even things like assault cannons will be wounding them on 5s and 6s it would seem. On top of that, their durability has taken really quite a big boost. They've gained a feel no pain type save of 5+, where previously they just had the 6+ invul save before. I think that's a very nice benefit, means that a 3 damage weapon that would have just killed them straight away before now is very likely not to, as you're likely to pass one of those saves. For their attacks, the Stickers gains the Lance keyword, so it's +1 to wound on the charge. Both at range and in melee, it's got the anti-monster, anti-vehicle 4+ keyword, though no devastating wounds to pair with it, so you're not getting mortals with it. And the Saddle Gits and Squighog Jaws have been consolidated into one profile as well, hitting on 4s, a strength 6, AP -2, damage 2. Overall seem fairly solid and generalist, really quite a lot of attacks at damage 2, seem nice enough for clearing out Space Marines, and could be kind of good against monsters and vehicles as well, given that they wound them a bit better than most. Their special rule is ignoring modifiers to move and charge, which I suppose is nice enough. They've still got a bomb squig with the same rules as the commandos, and they can be led by a knob on a smasher squig now, so you do have the option for a leader for the unit. I felt like it was kind of weird that he basically had no interaction with them whatsoever before. Next up, we're on to vehicle units, and I thought we'd start with the Orky artillery, then go into the vehicles proper. The mech guns again have a broadly similar profile. They've got toughness 5, 6 wounds, and still more leadership issues than just about anything else in the army, having only a leadership of 8. Again, they traded the Ramshackle -1 damage for a 6+ invulnerable save. Not too bad when they've only got a 5+ save to start with. All of their guns have had slight tweaks. The bubble chocker now allows you to roll and then select the profile that you're attacking with. I think that's really going to be quite a big boost for that, as now you can see what profile you've got, and then choose which targets are best going to be suited to that. Still might be a bit random, but I guess the damage output does look rather good with it. Perhaps the dense bubbles at d6+3 damage look particularly threatening. Otherwise, the tractor cannon has gained anti-fly 2+ and devastating wounds. That's really quite punchy when it hits on a 4, strength 10 and damage d6+1. Potentially they could be pretty ruinous to fly infantry, if you get a wound through with that one on a 2+. If it's a fly unit, that's basically d6+1 mortal wounds right there. It could lay waste to basically half a jump infantry squad perhaps. The custom mega cannon still looks like a really good all-rounder. It's lost a little bit of AP but goes up to strength 12, so still looks excellent for trying to take down enemy tanks. The blast keyword should make it pretty effective against infantry as well, so I still think it's probably one of the ones to beat. The smasher gun still seems like it's going to be looking at the custom mega cannon with a bit of envy. It's strength 9, AP 3 and damage 3, and only gets D3 attacks. Their special rule is interestingly called Splat. Apparently you get a damage buff against horde units there. If you're shooting at a unit with 10 or more models, then you get to reroll a hit roll of 1. That's looking kinda nasty if you pair it with any of the blast weapons out of these, particularly the custom mega cannon I think looks pretty nasty alongside Splat. I'd be kind of surprised if they weren't at least somewhat efficient firepower here. Generally the deal with them seems to be that they trade off maneuverability and synergies and things, but just hit really quite hard in terms of raw firepower for low investment. At least you won't have the issue with losing one of them and then having a very high chance for the others to run off. Getting into vehicles proper, and we've got the battle wagon. This one seems to have rolled in both the gun wagon and the bone breaker. Both of those are basically just represented by war gear options on this now. Kind of a shame that they won't be getting any datasheet special rules for themselves. Battle wagons have certainly been really quite powerful towards the end of 9th edition, transporting big scary Orky melee units around. The new version transport capacity goes up to 22 to allow for attached characters. They can transport Ghazghkull Thraka, and all of those models can fire out with the firing deck keyword should you wish to, unless you buy a hard case that gives you toughness 12 instead. Otherwise, the battle wagon's toughness 10, a 3+ save and 16 wounds, fairly hard to take out, and particularly for small arms these days. Its special rule just doubles down on the durability. Ramshackle but rugged, worsens the enemy AP of each attack by 1, particularly nasty against AP1 and AP2 weapons, which are quite common in 40k. Otherwise, it's a tiny bit slower at 10 inches, though has got the new transport changes for models jumping out of it, which might help. Weapons-wise, the kill cannon is worth a bit more, with an extra 3 shots on it. It only averages to 1 extra hit on your Orky ballistic skill of 5+, though. The Death Roll is a little bit less impressive, with worse AP, hitting on a 3+. The Claw gets 2 attacks now rather than 1, and Wrecking Ball's got better damage, but AP 0 still looks a little bit on the situational side. They're both combat weapons with the extra attacks rule now. Overall, still looks really interesting. Delivering absolute hordes of Orky infantry to the front seems like a good idea to me. It does look really quite hard to kill with worsening the AP as well, basically kind of the equivalent of a 2+ save on it. Talking of 2+ saves though, next up we have the Death Dread. He indeed has one, as well as toughness 9 and 8 wounds. He's going to be a bit tankier and harder to take out now. Unlike the Loyalist Dreadnoughts that gave up their -1 damage for this kind of profile, the Death Dread's just had it as basically a flat upgrade. Another nice shift is that he moves 8 inches as well. That's really quite nice for a walker that has quite a lot of power in melee. Definitely wouldn't turn that down, and it's going to make him a bit harder to ignore. Otherwise, the stats are kind of similar to how they were before. The custom Mega Blaster on his guns has had its improved profile. I think the rocket launcher is kind of interesting as well. The Dreadclaws have dropped a pip of AP and still have that thing where if you take more of them you get more attacks. His special rule is that in the fight phase, each enemy unit within engagement range has to take a battle shock test with him. A lot of the time it might do nothing, but on occasion I guess that might mean that you prevent opponents' stratagems like interrupting in combat. Overall looks decently improved to me, really quite decently tougher with that 2+ save, and also 8-inch movement is very nice. The Grot Walkers that are the killer cans didn't really get the same sort of treatment though. Their profile is broadly unchanged, toughness 6, 3+ save, and 5 wounds. They have gained a pip of toughness to toughness 6 from toughness 5, but not really any more than that. Again, being Gretchen without a runt herd, their leadership is kind of awful. Leadership 8, so if you have one of them, they're going to get battle shocked very easily. Means that you just can't really rely on them to hold objectives or things, and are particularly vulnerable to the enemy casting battle shock on them themselves. Otherwise, their big shooter has been upgraded with devastating wounds. The Grot Zuka gains an extra +1 shot on average, and if you want to try and get the ignores cover keyword on that shooting that they get, then you can do so. You just have to roll a dice, and on a 1, then one of the cans gets a bit carried away with the whole firepower thing, and decides to start laying into their Orky masters and deals D3 mortal wounds to the nearest visible Orc unit. I guess when you've gained control of a great big Orky walker, it might be time for a bit of revenge on the folks that have bullied you in the past. Overall, broadly seem to do what they do now. Hopefully they'll remain a nice cheap unit to just gum up the enemy with a whole bunch of wounds to deal with, and ones that just aren't particularly easy to deal with small arms, forcing you to commit big anti-tank weapons to them. For the Beast Snagger boys, their ride is the great big kill rig. Transport capacity increased to 11 now, which I think is very nice, as previously with 10 you could only have a Beast Snagger boys mob, and there wasn't enough room for a beast boss should you want one. They can all fire out of it with the firing deck keyword, though generally they're just going to be firing sluggers and the odd thump gun. Otherwise, it lost a little bit of movement, going down from movement 12 down to move 10. It's still very tanky, now up to toughness 10 with its big 16 wounds. It's traded the 6+ imball save for the 6+ feel no pain, which I think on a big model is pretty much a direct improvement there. The 6+ imball is only really helping you out against Melter from time to time. The sticker cannon has had its rules tweaked. That's the harpoon gun that sort of skewers enemy vehicles. It now wounds big stuff on a 2+, so if you get an unlikely hit, at least you're quite likely to do some damage with it. And previously it had the rule where basically it would chain the vehicle to your vehicle, so it couldn't move more than 12 inches away. Now instead it gives you a helpful +2 inches to your charge if you make a hit. Not too bad given that the kill rig's profile is pretty decent in melee. Otherwise for shooting, the Whir Tower still auto hits, strength 12, AP -3 and damage D6. I feel like that could make the kill rig kind of interesting for the Overwatch stratagem. Big shot anti-tank weapons fired in your opponent's turn, auto hitting is quite nice. Could definitely catch them by surprise if they move an injured vehicle within range. Otherwise in combat it's still solid. Various different profile hits that are good at killing both light infantry and somewhat against heavies with multi-damage, and they'll be getting those exploding sixes as well now with the regular detachment rule. Finally, as if that weren't quite enough, this multi-threat thing, It's also got a psychic power called Spirit of Gork. On a 2 to 5, it just adds +1 to your strength of one nearby Orks unit. Could make your beast snaggers from strength 5 to strength 6. If you get super lucky, then you get a 6 and you get lethal hits. That would be incredibly nice for most Orks in general. Plus, it could make that stratagem really good for critical hits on a 5+ if you went on to use that. Overall, still seems very solid indeed. Still looks pretty interesting as a frontline damage dealer with quite a lot of threats going on and a big priority for your opponent to try and bring down. The Hunter rig is its transport equivalent. This one's now got a transport capacity of 21, basically a big beast snagger mob, plus also an attached character if you'd like, and broadly speaking it's just very similar to the kill rig beyond that. As with before, it'll trade out a fair few points for lacking the psychic shenanigans of the Word Tower, and also it won't get you the +1 to strength buff that you get as its secondary power. Otherwise, besides holding a big mob, its only other main thing is that it gets some very safe disembarking if the unit is destroyed while the mob is embarked. Each time you roll to see if the destroyed transport deals a mortal wound, you get to re-roll any failed results, meaning that you'll often be able to disembark a full 20-man squad and have a solid chance not to lose a model at all. Still might be a bit niche compared with a battle wagon. Battle wagons can transport all the other Orky units, not just beast snaggers, so maybe you're a little bit less limited there. Next, we've got our 5 flavours of buggies, most of which have some very similar changes and basically have the same stat line. The only major difference between them is the different guns and special rules that they have. They have had a few common changes. They've gone up to toughness 7 and +1 wounds, usually with a 4+ save. Maybe a tiny bit tougher, but won't really change too much against anti-tank weapons, which generally went up in strength as well. The other major change for them is they can't be taken in units anymore. Seems that Games Workshop just thought you could spam these a bit too much previously. They did limit the numbers that you could take. They basically all just run around as independent buggies now, though I guess it's quite easy to field them en masse now, seeing as they're not competing for fast attack slots. You could absolutely have an army with like 15 of these in, if you did want to go Mad Max style Orks. For the first one, we've got the Boomdacker Snaz wagon with the mech special with the high rate of fire. The mech special has been amped up a little bit here. It's lost a bit of AP, but has rapid fire 4 with 12 shots, a little bit of extra volume fire there, and also has the sustained hits 1 rule which it didn't have before, so you are landing a few more shots on enemy infantry. Still only hits on a 5 though, so it's not going to be that great a damage output, around about 8 hits at that profile within half range. Otherwise, it's got dust trails which makes nearby enemy units get -1 to hit. I guess that's more useful sort of defensively really if they're trying to assault you. I guess could be kind of disruptive just to charge one straight into the opposing lines. Could be a bit annoying for their shooting, I suppose. The custom booster blaster gets the similar sort of changes to its profile. The main changes for this one are to the guns. The rivet cannon gains a little bit of strength but has lost AP, and unfortunately the burner exhausts have been toned down really quite a bit. Previously they just gave you 4d6 shots at strength 4, AP 0, damage 1, now it's only 2d6 with twin linked. Perhaps the main purpose of this one is that the rivet cannon hands out a -1 to hit debuff on the enemy unit. That's kind of nice for the suppression fire. It doesn't seem that that's limited to infantry or anything like that, so just firing off a hail of rivets into the biggest scariest enemy unit that the opponent has seems pretty nice. Make a big Terminator squad hit on one worse, or something big like an Imperial Knight ideally. The Rocket Truck Squig Buggy is still basically the Orky artillery piece that moves fast. Previously it had 2 different Squig launchers that they've been consolidated in just one profile, d6 plus 6 shots hitting on 5, at strength 5 AP -1 and damage 2 with blast and ignores cover. If you fire them out of line of sight you will be hitting on 6s normally, but it does have a special rule to counter that for infantry. If you're firing against an infantry unit, then buzzer swigs have them hitting on a +1 to hit. Probably means that it's basically quite effective, ignores line of sight anti-infantry fire, but not much good for other things. On average, each one of these lands around about 3 hits at that profile against infantry. It's not going to be taking down entire squads by itself. Otherwise, I do quite like the profile for the Squig Mine on this one. Once per battle at the start of any phase, roll the dice on a 4+, the enemy unit within 3 inches of this thing takes d6 mortal wounds. It is a bit random, but it's quite fun that that's basically anti-charge threat there. Use this at the start of the fight phase after your opponent's just charged you. You might take a massive chunk out of the enemy unit before this thing gets taken down. The Shock Drum Dragster is the Orky teleporting car. This one's had a change to the custom shock rifle, where it sadly only got 1 shot rather than 2, which does definitely cut the damage output, but in a bit of exchange for that, it's gained the devastating wounds keyword, so any wound roll of a 6 will be pretty big with a damage d6 plus 1, and perhaps more interestingly than that, it's also gained precision as well. So basically Orks now actually have a sniper weapon in their arsenal. something that they didn't really have as a battlefield role before, so I guess that's kind of nice to have the option for a bit of anti-character. Still though, even hitting on a 3 plus with quite a punchy profile, it's going to be pretty swingy. Either you're going to get that big wound through or not, and characters with good invul saves will just re-roll that with a command point re-roll if they are very scared of it. Still seems very fun though. Otherwise, it still has its ability to teleport. Each time the model advances, then you get to redeploy it anywhere 9 inches away from the enemy. I guess if you're in the Waaagh, you could potentially use that to redeploy and then also declare a charge afterwards. That could be kind of fun and disruptive. Finally, for the Orky Boggies, besides the character Wartrike, we've got the Megatrap Scrapjet. These guys were perhaps the pick of the bunch in terms of raw damage dealing. I feel like they've perhaps made a bit of an effort to put them on a bit more par with the others, and they don't do quite as much damage with the rockets now. The rocket cannon with now d6 plus 1 attacks gets a few fewer shots on average than it had previously. Still fairly potent though, with strength 9 and damage 3, and with the wing missiles they no longer get a plus 1 to hit against vehicles. The twin big shooters have also been toned down a little bit, not getting double the shots and trading that out for twin linked. Finally, the nose drill has also been nerfed a bit as well. It's now a lot more on par with what the other ones can do in combat. Strength 8, AP minus 1 and damage 2. Not no threats, but not quite as much as it was. It does still get some nice mortal wound impact hits though. If it makes a charge then on a 2 to 5, then the enemy suffers D3 mortal wounds, and on a 6 it's 3. Still looks like it's probably the biggest and heaviest damage dealer out of the various different boggies though. A fair bit of damage 3 shooting and charges harder than most. Next up we've got Titanic Orc units with the Gorkanaut, Morkanaut and Stomper. The Naught's supposed to have a transport capacity of 12, and their new profile is toughness 12, 20 wounds, a 3 plus save and a 6 plus invulnerable. The toughness has gone up decently, and I feel like there'll be more weapons that are wounding them on a 5 than before, though they have lost a few wounds. Otherwise, objective control 8 is pretty decent, but they do have that towering keyword, which means that you can fire at them behind terrain. So as before, there's basically no hiding these things if you've got ruins without some enormous blank walls with no windows. For the weapons, the Mega Shooter's unchanged. The Claw loses a little bit of AP, but still hits monstrously hard with 5 attacks at strength 18 and damage 6. It is very much a Knight class combat weapon there. And for its special rules, it gets a plus 1 to hit in the Waaagh in melee, and it can move over enemy models and small bits of terrain due to its big and stompy keyword. A nice big unsubtle walker here. I feel like so far its stat line for the points has been kind of underwhelming throughout ever since it came out. Who knows, maybe Games Workshop might be kind to it with the points in 10th edition. Otherwise for the Morkanaut, basically most of the profile is pretty much exactly the same as the Gorkanaut. The main changes are that instead of the big shooter, it gets a Mega Zapper, d6 plus 3 shots at damage d6 there, and it also trades out a little bit of melee, only having 4 attacks with the Claw of Mork for getting a better invulnerable save on a 5 plus. Looks like it no longer has an aura of custom force field effect though. It won't affect anything nearby, just the walker itself. Otherwise, unlike the Gorkanaut, it gets a plus 1 to hit in the Waaagh at range. That's actually kind of big on the big custom Mega Zapper. If you go from hitting on a 5 plus to hitting on a 4, that's going to be a whole load of extra damage. Finally, for the Orc Super Heavies, we've got the Stomper. Toughness 14 and 30 wounds with a 2 plus save. They're not really messing around with the raw stats here. Objective control 12 is really quite decent, and if this is parked on an objective, you're going to struggle to take it away from it. Again, in terms of raw damage output, there's no enormous changes here from 9th edition really. The Def Cannon's still very good against tanks, 3d6 shots at strength 14 and damage d6, though an Orky ballistic skill does mean that you're not hitting with many of those. It's got the Super Gatler for 20 shots at strength 7 and damage 2, very good for mowing down a few Space Marines there. And of course its combat profile is truly ridiculous. Strength 24, AP minus 5 and damage 10. Easily a profile that will happily just destroy an Imperial Knight then and there. If you're fielding one of these, it's basically mandatory to include a mech. The mini mech now gives this thing a plus 1 to hit for a command phase buff, and that's kind of ridiculous given how many big scary guns it can field. Otherwise, it's still a Waaagh effigy, giving you a plus 1 to your battle shock tests, has the same movement restrictions as the last one, and can even move over things that are monsters and vehicles, just not Titanic. Though realistically, with the enormous size of this thing, with a 10-inch move it might struggle to clear them. If you do roll a 6 for the explosion as well, it's truly apocalyptic, going off on a 2d6 mortal wounds, which is kind of cool. Again, I'd be very surprised if this thing winds up being competitive in any way, shape or form. Games Workshop does seem to have a bit of a history of keeping it kind of niche, so the best way to play Orcs isn't just to play Orky Knights with Stompers. For the faction's dedicated transport, we've got the Truck. This one's got a transport capacity of 12, and again the firing deck 12 keyword. Defense wise, it's been boosted to toughness 8, so I guess it's a little bit more durable against things like overcharged plasma, and it swapped its -1 damage from Ramshackle for the 6+ invulnerable save again. Again, not too terrible given that it's got a 4+ save to start with. Kind of like the Space Marine Rhino, it regenerates 1 wound in the command phase per turn, this time with Grot Riggers though, banging it back together. Seems like it should be interesting enough for zooming boys onto points with the new transport rules. It is quite nice the way that you can move and disembark now, even if that would stop you charging in the same turn. I guess transport-based orcs are still probably going to be usable, given that you want to deliver the boys to melee intact. The truck's usually fairly efficient for that sort of thing, being nice and focused and kind of no frills. You're basically paying for the speed and durability, and not really much else. Will be kind of a shame that truck boys has gone away though. That was a very nice way of getting a unit of boys a surprisingly long distance across the battlefield. Orky Flyers next, and I'd say for the most part Games Workshop hasn't been too kind to these. The new flyer rules probably don't help as a start. None of them have the hover keyword, so it means that you have to start them off the board. They come in by strategic reserve turn 2, and then from there they get kind of a locked velocity, must move at least 20 inches and in a straight line from where you set them up, and only get to pivot at the end of the turn. They also don't get a -1 to hit anymore, so I guess that's one durability thing that they've had toned down, but they have gone up in toughness to toughness 9. The Wasp-Bomb Blaster Jet was definitely one of the terrors of the air in 9th edition, particularly with those teleport blasters with the massive damage. It still definitely looks threatening, though maybe a little bit less so than before perhaps. Most of its attacks lost AP, maybe not too unusual for 10th edition. A bunch of its weapons got handed twin-linked as well, rather than double the shots, which I think is generally going to be a downgrade. And for some reason the teleport blasters lost a bit of accuracy as well. Everything else hits on a 4+, as it's a mech flying the plane, but the teleport blasters don't and only hits on a 5+, so usually only the one hit out of those now. It did get a small damage boost against non-fly things with a reroll hit rolls of 1 against them, but I feel like that's not really enough to outweigh the damage that's been lost. Hopefully as a result it'll cost a decent amount less now. I certainly feel like it's a bit less terrifying to enemy armor and just hoovering it off the board. Otherwise, the Blasterjet Force Field no longer protects nearby planes, it just gives you a 4+ invulnerable save now. I do find it kind of funny though that you basically have either the option of the Force Field or that Stick Bomb Chucker, and the Stick Bomb Chucker just gives it the grenade stratagem, so if you really wanted to, you could augment your damage with a little bit of mortal wound damage output dropped from a plane. Overall, I'd say it's definitely a bit less intimidating. Hopefully we'll wind up costing less points as a result, but at least the shooting damage is a little bit more amenable to starting in strategic reserve, unlike some of the others. Talking of which, and kind of regardless of the points, the Burner Bomber and the Blitzer Bomber are both looking absolutely dreadful this edition. Their shooting's basically a few super shooters, but not as many as the Dakka Jet, and the Burner Bomber can also upgrade to a Scorcher missile rack as well, though even this has been toned down a bit, getting less AP and less strength. The most disappointing thing about the bombers, I think, is the power of the bombs. Other flyers in 40k still seem to have at least fairly dangerous bombs, but the Burner Bomber just rolls a single d6 per each model in the target unit, and you need a 6 to deal a mortal wound to them. On squads of 10 that's usually going to be 1 or 2, and even on big squads of 20 that's only going up to 3 or 4. What's worse is that due to starting in strategic reserve, it means that you're not dropping that bomb till turn 3 earliest, just kind of bad all round. It's really not too much better for the Blitzer Bomber either. The only real big difference for this one is no Scorcher missiles plus the change of bomb. This one's now an unreliable 4+ chance for d6 mortal wounds, again pretty unexciting compared with bombers in 9th edition, and also kind of hilariously unreliable, only going off on a 4+. Realistically, you're probably only going to drop 1 or 2 bombs per game as well, due to the locked flyer rules, and your opponent even has a flight path that they can scurry out the way of. I'm not sure Games Workshop's really doing much to encourage Orky Flyers this time round. Finally, there might be a little bit more hope for the Dakka Jet. At least this one does shooting, so when it turns up turn 2, it can fire to full effect, and it still does have a fair few anti-infantry shots. The super shooters have picked up the twin links rule rather than just extra shots, so it's not quite as good against hordes as it used to be, as it didn't really need the twin linked, often wounding toughness 3 things on 2s. For losing all those shots though, it has picked up quite a nice upgrade with the Dakka Storm. It basically gets sustained hits, and those sustained hits go off on a 5+ as well. I feel like between those two rules it does do enough to compensate them for the lost damage for the extra shots. Overall I feel like it works out around about similar to what it was, maybe even a little bit better against harder targets. I guess this one and the Wasp-Bomb are probably going to be the ones that are most likely to be good, though without any other buffing rules like Speed Waaagh, they might have to be a little bit cheaper to justify themselves. Next we've got a couple of Orky Fortifications. The first one's the Big Head Boss Bunker. This one transports 12 and is now a toughness 10 bunker that you set up in your own deployment zone, so it's gained a bit of toughness from T8 as it was before. Kind of a bit sad that you can't teleport this thing anymore. It was kind of a meme that you could do this with a whole bunch of looters or tank busters or something. Otherwise, the focus of it does seem to have been shifted to be a bit more of a bunker and a bit less of a damage dealer. The Gaze of Gork went from being really quite surprisingly reliable damage to having Orky ballistic skill to contend with. It was perhaps a bit surprising that it auto hit on the Squint version. It's traded that out for sustained hits D3. Otherwise, it functions basically like terrain, gives you the benefit of cover if you're partially obscured by this thing, and also the shout and pole gives you a +1 leadership for units nearby. Not too terrible when Orky ballistic skill is a 7+. I guess might be interesting enough for some camping out looters or maybe some other units like flash gits. The only downside is that you wouldn't be able to use your unit roll from within it, as the firing depth rule means that their gun profiles basically get added to this one. Next up we've got the Mech Boy Workshop. This one's actually got a profile that you can damage now, toughness 9, a 4+ save and 10 wounds, so perhaps isn't super hard to kill. This one's got similar sort of rules to the boss bunker. Basically it gives you cover if you're partially obscured by it, plus it's got fortification engagement range rules, which means that it basically doesn't really lock up enemy infantry, as you'd kind of expect. Previously the special rule for this was utterly dreadful, but now I think it's kind of interesting and surprisingly de-restrictive. If you've got any damaged Orky vehicles within 12 inches of it, then at the end of your movement phase you get to heal those vehicles at D3 wounds, and it looks like the mech shop could even put itself back together as it itself is a vehicle. Unless this winds up being very very expensive, it does seem kind of nice to have a copy of this in a vehicle heavy army. Try and have a bunch of your vehicles just towing into the area of effect for this. Seems likely that it should be good for at least a fair few healed wounds over the course of the game. Whether or not it really does quite enough to justify its points cost though might be another thing. Orky characters next. We'll start with all the generic non-named ones and then go through their epic heroes. First up is the War Boss, and there doesn't look like there's any sort of restrictions on how many bosses you can take now, fortunately. It seems that if you did want to make use of your Knobs and Boys special rules, it seems that you could have 3 War Bosses working in tandem and leading all the squads. He can only lead Knobs and Boys though. He's locked out of really quite a lot of units. He can't run around with looters or burners, for example. Statline wise, he's dropped down to toughness 5, maybe to fit in with the same toughness profile as the Knob squad, and he does have a 6+ leadership rather than a 7+, so it does mean that that will actually protect the mob a little bit against battle shock. In combat, his Power Claw has lost a little bit of AP, only 4 attacks hitting on a 3+ at strength 10, AP2, damage 2, looks maybe at least a little bit more balanced against the big chopper, which hits better and has more attacks. Still looks like it might be the difference between the strength and the AP mattering. Looks like they're a lot more balanced than they were before maybe. Otherwise he still has his attack squig, and his special rule is to give the squad a +1 to hit in melee. Now it's just for the lead unit though, as opposed to being in an aura. I guess that would help out his Power Claw to be fair, so I suppose that removes one of the disadvantages versus the big chopper. Finally, I guess as he's the one calling the Waaagh, he gets better in it. When you call a Waaagh, you get an extra 4 attacks for him on his model's melee weapons, so I guess that would be 4 attacks on the Power Claw going up to 8, really quite threatening there. Overall seems decent enough. The basic War Boss though really just does seem to amp up your combat power. I feel like he might be a bit more used in a Knob squad as a result. They do have plenty of big threatening general purpose weapons with damage too, plus they really want a leader in the unit to be -1 to wound. If you want a War Boss to lead the Mega Knobs around, then you can take the Mega Armoured War Boss, who I suspect is going to really lose out to the big Mecha Mega Armour, as we'll see in a second. Otherwise though, the Mega Boss just adds more raw violence. The huge chopper has strength 12 and hits on a 2+, but lost 1 attack. It also lost some AP like most melee weapons. Otherwise he's got the same +1 to hit for the unit, maybe particularly relevant on Mega Knobs as they hit on a 4+, and his special rule is that when you call the Waaagh until the start of the next battle round, the model gets the Feel No Pain 4+ ability. Definitely not the worst on a big tanky model, but I feel like most of the time he's generally going to be running around with the Mega Knobs, so he won't get to use the defensive profile unless his bodyguards have all been shot down. Overall, I feel like the big mech is probably going to add more, as we'll get onto in just a second. Otherwise for bosses though, we've also got the Beast bosses. The Beast boss on foot is very similar to the Ork War boss on foot. He's got the option of the Beast Chopper and the Power Claw. Having both on the same model, it does make him a bit more flexible and generalist compared with the War boss, as he gets to pick his melee attack profile each time he fights. The Beast Chopper has a bit less strength but more attacks compared with the regular War boss, and both of the profiles always wound vehicles and monsters on 4s. Otherwise, compared with the War boss, he gets a 6+ Feel No Pain, As well as the +1 to hit, his special rule is called Beastly Rage. Each time he makes a charge move, then until the end of the turn, the melee weapons he's holding gets devastating wounds. Really very nice with anti-vehicle and anti-monster. That would be a massive amount of mortal wounds into those targets. He doesn't get the big attack buff in the Waaagh though, and he does lose out on a little bit of shooting and attack squig attacks. He can't lead knobs as well, which I guess would be another downside. Otherwise, one of the units that seems to have changed the most is the Beast Boss on the Squigosaur. The most notable change to this guy is that enemy anti-tank weapons are just going to be able to directly target him if he's out in the open. Instead of having mounted, he's got the monster keyword. He's not allowed to attach to Squighog Boys, which are the unit that I guessed he would have led. Now he's basically just a solo monster on his own, running around and doing his own thing. Probably as a result of that, they've decided that they needed to massively increase his durability, and it wasn't too bad before. Now he's got a toughness of 10, so a toughness better than a Rhino tank, a save of a 3+, and 9 wounds, and perhaps most importantly, he's swapped out his -1 damage for just a 4+ feel no pain type save. That basically doubles his durability from what you might expect, effectively 18 wounds compared with if he didn't have that rule. Overall, he does look very, very durable, though I guess he needs to be if he's going to be taking anti-tank fire on quite a valuable model. Otherwise, his combat profile is really quite similar. The Squigosaur's jaws still have the option to deal devastating wounds on a 6, so that's kind of fun. And otherwise, he has a 1 CP heroic intervention stratagem to potentially support units nearby, and he's got an aura of rerolls for nearby beast snaggers charges, just a little bit of a help to get them towards combat, might save you a command point or two there. In general though, I don't really think he's all that great in terms of supporting units. He really just is a big tough monster to throw towards the enemy. Just a bit of a different flavour of one being a character as opposed to a dreadnought or vehicle or something. Next up, we've got the Deathkiller Wartrag. This speed boss now can attach to a unit of warbags, and generally adds a bit of combat threat to the unit and a bit of close range shooting with some killer jet burners. His melee is perhaps a little bit less good than it used to be though. 4 attacks hitting on 3 at strength 10, AP 2 and damage 2. The Snagger Claw lost the wound rerolls. His leadership abilities give the Warbiker squad his leading a +1 to hit with their combat weapons. I guess that gets the Snagger Claw back to hitting on a 2+, and it's kind of interesting for getting them to zoom towards their opponents during the Waaagh. They get to advance 6 inches, so I guess that would be an 18-inch move, and then charge in after in the turn that you've called the Waaagh there. As a big tough model with 9 wounds as well, he does seem kind of nice for that 4+ feel no pain type enhancement. I feel like you're really going to get better value out of it than him, basically doubling his durability on a model that already took a little bit of focused fire to bring down. Next up, and perhaps arguably one of the most improved units in the entire codex, is the Big Mech in Mega Armor. Wasn't really expecting this, but this guy seems to basically be an Orky apothecary for your Mega Knobs now. Unlike the Wasbomb plane, and apparently the shock attack gun if it's standing still, he's going to be hitting a bit worse with shooting. Previously they hit on a 4+, and now it's back to a 5 again. Can't even trust the mechanic orcs to shoot straight apparently. Otherwise though, he gives you a reroll 1s to hit for the Mega Knobs, and I guess that would help his own shooting profile for whichever weapons he chooses to take. Though really what he brings to the Mega Knob unit I think is all about durability, and he just helps them out on all sorts of different levels. First up, and perhaps biggest, he gets to revive 1 slain model to the squad per turn. It seems that rather than healing vehicles, he'll now fix up your Knob's Mega Armor and get them back in the fight. That's really quite a big deal. Adding a big valuable model back to the mob each turn is nice in itself, and also could be handy for getting a shorter charge off, setting it up at the front of the unit. Then if you pick up the custom force field instead of the teleport blaster, it gives you a 4+ invulnerable save against ranged attacks. Very very nice on Mega Knobs, seeing as they're often going to be eating anti-tank fire. Like the Morkanaut, this one no longer gives you an aura of 6+ invuls though, even if that was a little bit lackluster in its own right anyway. The Grot Oiler even adds to the theme of healing even further for himself. He gets to repair a model for D3 lost wounds once per game. Not too bad to regenerate a model and also heal up a damaged one. Overall, I feel like between that and his admittedly decent enough melee profile with his extra kill saw plus a bit of extra shooting, it looks like a really good model to add to the unit I think. I can't help but think he's just going to add a fair bit more value than a war boss does. Otherwise for the mechs, we've got the big mech with a custom force field. He's quite de-restricted in terms of which units that he can lead. He can go in boys, burner boys, tank busters, looters or knobs. He's got a slightly weaker version of the custom force field as it's on a 5+ rather than a 4+, though once per game he gets to overcharge to a 4+, and his grot assistant allows an extra overcharge, so I guess potentially that's 2 different turns of 4+ invul. I guess it could well be worth using one of those turns on the same turn as the Waaagh, as otherwise he's not really doing anything that the Waaagh wouldn't do anyway, as that gives you the 5+ invulnerable save anyway. Otherwise he also gives you reroll hit rolls of 1 at range, kind of underwhelming for the vast majority of these, and perhaps sadly particularly for the burners, as they don't have a hit reroll. Out of these, the only unit that'd really be all that bothered about the range damage output would probably be the looters. I guess if they do wind up being really cheap, maybe you could justify this guy in a unit of them to keep them a little bit safer while they try and hoover squads off objectives. Next up, we've got the crazy Snotling firing shock attack gun. This one was one of the terrors of 8th edition with that souped up shocker relic that you could get for it. It's definitely been very lackluster in 9th, though perhaps this profile does look a little bit more threatening. D6+1 attacks at strength 9, AP 4 and damage D6, with a 10th edition blast keyword which should help out with a few more shots than it did before. Seems like okay anti-elite damage, maybe not super exciting against tanks maybe. And again, like the other mechs, it seems like he gives the squad a reroll hit rolls of 1, which he himself will be able to use. As well as the raw damage, you get to hand out a battle shock test for deranged snotlings materializing within the brains of the opponents. That can always unsettle you, I guess. And once per game, his particular grot assistant allows you to re-roll the dice for the number of shots on the shock attack gun. Could be quite good for whenever you get unlucky and roll that low 1. Overall, I guess still could be interesting enough. Perhaps another interesting enough unit to sit in a looter's mob. Being basically just direct extra firepower though, it really is just going to depend on whether or not he's worth it for the points, and whether he's really up to scratch versus all the other orc firepower that you can take. Finally for mechs, we have the standard mini mech. Again, this guy's got really quite de-restrictive units that he can join. Boys, looters, mech guns, knobs, or tank busters. Kind of interesting that he can join the guns there. And otherwise, if he'd like, he could be a lone operative near vehicles. If he stays within 3 inches of them, he can't be shot outside of 12. Stats wise, he's gained a wound, so is actually a bit more on par with the big mechs now. And his special rule, rather than giving you hit rerolls or anything like that, is that he gives a +1 to hit and heals D3 wounds on 1 orc vehicle per turn. Generally, this is really quite a nice buff, I think. A +1 to hit is kind of huge for orky ballistic skill of a 5+. Unless this guy's incredibly expensive, he's basically auto-include if you use a stomper with those crazy big guns, and seems like he could be on paper pretty interesting for a battle wagon's kill cannon with those D6+3 shots, or the Gorkanaut or the Morkanaut with their shooting. I guess with mediocre other things that he does, he will remain kind of cheap. If any more ranged threats are actually really quite efficient in the Orc army, then he could be an almost auto-include choice to buff some of them. Orky Psychers next, and we have the Weird Boy and the Word Boy. Out of the two, I think I still prefer the Weird Boy, who has Dad Jump. He can only lead boys though, so unfortunately no hopping around for other units, much as it would have been fun to jump around and burning people with Burner Boys or something. It is also his own unit as well, so he can't cast it on another Orky squad nearby. That definitely does limit its utility compared with what it was before. Otherwise though, kinda nice that that just happens on a 2+, the opponent doesn't have any way to deny it or anything like that. And otherwise his secondary attack is Edbanger, basically another way that you can snipe things with orcs. Just a single shot that hits on a 4+, with strength 6, AP -3 and damage 1. But then the fun buff that it gets is that you get an extra pip of strength and damage for every 5 models in the squad. In theory, if he's leading a 20 boy unit, that would go up to strength 10, AP 3 and a big damage of 5. Definitely has the potential to snipe some characters there, though hitting on a 4+ is kind of unreliable, and I'm not sure you could really justify building out that many boys just literally for this spell. Still though, just dropping 20 boys onto the battlefield anywhere does seem kind of good. Looks like you could even combine that with that stratagem as well for the +2 to advance and charge, so you could potentially teleport them around the board, and then have a 7-inch charge on your opponent out of deep strike, very reliable with a command point reroll. I do quite like the way as well that the Orky Psychers also have deadly demise. When you kill one of these, there's at least a small chance that they're just going to blow up in your face and shower everyone around with D3 mortal wounds. Otherwise, the Beast Snagger Psyker is the Word Boy. This guy's the one who's built with the Kill Rig kit. If he's not standing on top of a word tower, then he can lead some Beast Snagger boys, and his main damage dealer is the Eyes of Mork. Starts out with D6 shots hitting on a 5+ at strength 8, AP 3 and damage 2, and again with every 5 models in the unit you get an extra 2 shots with this, so I guess it goes up to a big D6+8 shots when you're 20 models strong. Does sound quite good, though it does only average around about 4 hits on your opponent even with that. Definitely not bad, but as with Ed Banger, I'm not entirely convinced that it's necessarily worth building out the squad literally for the Eyes of Mork and nothing else. Otherwise, the second debuff he gets is a big Battle Shock debuff that's declared in the opponent's command phase. You roll a dice, and on a 2+ you avoid mortal wounds, and then you can debuff one of your opponent's units and have a -2 to take a Battle Shock test. I feel like that one genuinely is quite a disruptive thing. Ideally, you want Battle Shock to be happening in your opponent's command phase, as then they might not be able to fall back, and the other debuffs come into play quite a lot more, like not being able to hold objectives. That does seem like really quite a big ability, but again I still feel like it's kind of situational. You are basically counting on making sure your opponent's unit is below half strength, but also you haven't been able to kill it. Overall, I definitely feel like it's not quite as cool as the jump with a +2-inch charge. Next up, we've got a couple of Pain Boys, the Pain Boss and the regular Pain Boy. The Pain Boss is the more Beast Snagger themed one. He can only lead Beast Snagger boys, and he gives them a 5+ feel no pain, so it makes the unit really quite a lot tankier. They do already have a 6+ just at base, so it's maybe not quite as big as getting a 5+ from nothing. Still, it equates to around about a 33% durability increase for the unit, though it gets far worse if it's not against damage 1 weapons. Kind of a bit disappointing that he can't lead Squighog boys. I thought that might have been kind of fun. I believe he had some lore with his great big bounding legs that meant he was able to keep up with them. Kind of wonder if that might have been a keyword thing that prevented him from doing that with them. He'd weirdly have a unit that's part infantry and part mounted. Otherwise, you've got a couple of other healing shenanigans, as well as a fairly decent bit of melee with anti-vehicle. Once per game he can heal D3 models in the squad with his Grot Orderly, and then once per turn as well he can also heal a Beast Snagger character for 3 wounds. That one seems pretty much destined to go on the Beast Boss on the Squigosaur, I think. Those things would look absolutely terrifying with that great defensive profile, and then casually regrowing a bunch of wounds with this guy souping them up. Overall, I feel like he does look pretty interesting. Extra durability on your Orks is generally a good thing, particularly when they have a 5+ regular save now. I think he looks extra tempting alongside a Squigosaur. Otherwise, your more standard Pain Boy can lead either boys, knobs, looters, burner boys, or tank busters. He again gives them a 5+ feel no pain type save, and I'd argue that that would go further on these guys, as these guys don't have a 6+ feel no pain to start with. A big squad of boys looks like pretty excellent value to me. Seems quite nice on a knob squad as well, given that they want a character to make them -1 to wound, and a 5+ feel no pain is really good on 2 wound models, protects them against damage 2 shots well as well. Otherwise, he's got a Power Claw, and really quite a fun Urti Syringe as well. This one you just get a single extra attack with that's anti-infantry and precision. If you are fighting against infantry and then you get a critical wound, get a 4+ there or 6+ against other things, then the affected unit gets d6 mortal wounds on them. A pretty crazy damage buff for just a throwaway extra attack that could very easily get that 4+ to wound against infantry. Pretty crazy thinking that you could just jab one Skitarii or Battle Sister or something, and then cause d6 mortal wounds to the rest of the squad. Otherwise, again with the Pain Boss, he can also heal d3 models once per game with the Grot Orderly. I feel like he is a pretty interesting choice just to amp up the raw durability and raw might of boys or knobs. Extra toughness is great for an Orc army, and he does chip in with a decent amount of his own melee and that scary anti-infantry attack too. The Orc Banner's next. The Knob with the Waaagh banner can go in either a boys squad or a knob squad. It does seem that the Waaagh banner itself now doubles basically as a Power Claw. I guess they've rewritten the profile a bit, as it basically looks like he's holding it with a Power Claw. This guy's buff's nice and simple. Basically it gives your unit that he's attached to a once per game extra Waaagh turn, declared at the start of the battle round. It means that you can get the extra violence with the extra damage, extra threat range with the big advance, and the 5+ invul save certainly doesn't hurt either. Whether or not it's worth a more permanent buff for another character though, say Pain Boy Feel No Pains or Weird Boy jumping around the board, is perhaps a different question. Otherwise as well, he does get a bit better during the Waaagh. On the 2 turns that his unit should have it, he'll have Objective Control 5 personally, and also a 4+ invulnerable save too. I guess that means if the rest of his squad does get shot down, he's still going to be a bit of a force on objectives, harder to kill, and getting a few more points to control it with. Finally, for the generic characters, we've got the Knob on Smasher Squig, finally able to actually lead the Squighog boys and actually do something to make them a bit better in combat. It was a bit weird him being entirely independent from them before, despite clearly being the squad leader in the box they're sold in. Individually, he's a bit more durable. He's gone up to Toughness 7 from Toughness 6, and also gained a rather good 5+ Feel No Pain save as well. Definitely going to take quite a lot of Bolt of Fire and things to bring him down with those 5 wounds and that boost. For what he brings to the unit, he gives them a +1 to hit in melee for them. Kind of handy, I guess, seeing as they can't have a war boss join them for that. His big chopper has the anti-4+ rule against monsters and vehicles, and 3+ in the Waaagh. Good Beast Snagger shenanigans there. and his Smasher Squig jaws have got a little bit lower strength. Previously they were strength 8, now they're down to strength 6. In general, he does seem like quite a solid unit for buffing the Beast Snagger boys, which do seem like a pretty decent unit to have charging around into combat. But I do think that I'm a bit disappointed that the Smasher Squig just doesn't appear to do any smashing anymore. In the previous codex, the whole point of this thing was it charged into combat and did a ton of damage just literally via the charge, with that great big headplate it's got. Potentially quite a fearsome amount of mortal wounds as well. Often charging would do more than the knob could in combat afterwards. Now though, they just seem to have completely removed that rule. Just seems like a kind of strange choice there, to be honest, given that the whole point of this seemed to be to charge into combat and deal damage with the smashing. I think it would have been a bit more fun if they'd at least given a bit of a nod to that. Finally, we get on to Orc epic heroes and named characters, starting off with the man himself, Ghazghkull Thraka. I feel like a lot of people have been a bit underwhelmed by Ghazghkull's new profile. It is a bit of a weird shift compared with what he had before. Previously, kind of like the beast boss on Swigosaurus, now he was a direct attack monster. Had to be ludicrously tough as the enemy could fire at him with big guns, and he even had one of those damage cap mechanics that meant that he couldn't lose more than 4 wounds per phase. Now though, maybe not too dissimilar from Abaddon the Despoiler, he just works very differently. He's gained infantry where he was previously a monster. He leads Meganobs and nothing else. Unfortunately, he can't attach to boys units, which I think might have been a nice option. And if he's in your army, he has to be the Warlord. On his personal stats, it's a bit disappointing that he's lost a bit of toughness. He's only toughness 6 now, I guess to fit in with the Meganob squad. Kind of a bit surprising when the beast boss on Swigosaur is toughness 10. I guess he can hide quite well in a squad now though, and he also has Makari's help for a little bit of extra durability. Makari's now basically built into his unit, and true to his very lucky ways, he can save a bunch of attacks that would usually kill a normal Gretchen. He has a 2+ invulnerable save, though kind of similar to a Drukari Archon Shadowfield, is not allowed to re-roll it, and only having 1 wound he basically dies when it goes. Otherwise though, his damage remains truly immense. Gork's Claw has 6 attacks at strength 14 and damage 4, though it doesn't degrade upwards now. And in terms of what he actually gives for the Orcs, he gives them a +1 to hit and wound for his own unit that is leading, the +1 to wound being particularly nice. In the Waaagh, he gives Orcs nearby lethal hits as well, a good time to crack out that stratagem which gets you critical hits on a 5+, and between all that he's definitely going to make the Orcs nearby him really quite a lot more violent. It is kind of interesting that he can still ride in a battle wagon or stomper now. Technically still a truck, but that feels like it's probably an oversight. He takes up the space of 18 models, so I guess there's not really any other room for other units to ride with him. I guess Makari would still count as one, and that would just stop him taking a Meganob guard. Overall, going to definitely have a bit of a different feel there. I guess the way to use him would probably be on foot with a big squad of Meganobs, and at the centre of your army to give the damage buffs to other nearby Orky combat. Next, we've got the new incarnation of Boss Snickrot with his Commando melee. He's had a lot of changes similar to the Commandos, no longer a boosted save, but he does get stealth, -1 toughness to toughness 5, but he's got a 5+ regular armor save, which could be relevant in cover. Mork's Teeth have lost a little bit of AP, down from AP2 to AP1, but overall I feel like they should be a bit more threatening. They've gained twin links at the cost of no attacks, so get to re-roll the wound roll, and they also have precision as well. So if your opponent's unit has characters in it, he's got a reasonable chance to try and carve them out of them. Otherwise, he gives the commandos the benefit of cover even if they're right out in the open, a bit more meaningful now they've got a 5+ save, and his special leadership trick is that once per game, in your movement phase he can basically teleport his units to somewhere else on the board, setting up greater than 9 inches horizontally from enemy models, potentially somewhere quite disruptive for your opponent. I can't help but think though that rule seems just a little bit at odds with his infiltrators type rule. He can already set up in the midfield, so his on-game board position is probably quite valuable already. It just might not be all that much value in it swapping it out for a deep strike. I suppose he could pull off some weird boy +2 to charge shenanigans like Dad Jump, I guess. Could be an interesting way of getting deep strike turn 1 in another way to the weird boy. Otherwise though, he's lost his leadership debuff, which is a bit sad in the age of battle shock, and has lost his +2 to saving cover and a +1 to wound near terrain. Perhaps a bit of a side grade overall, but at least his own personal melee is looking a bit more threatening. Next up, we've got the clawed bionic horror that is Zagstruck, moves 12 inches alongside his Storm Boys, and potentially really quite a big threat range with them, what with their advance and charge shenanigans. He's still got quite a meaty profile, 6 wounds at toughness 5 with a 5+ invul, and though he still has a feel no pain type save, it has been reduced slightly, going down to a 6 from 5. I think it's quite nice to see that he actually does something for his Storm Boy's damage output now. Previously, it was mainly just to sell on his raw damage output himself, which wasn't too bad, but now with him, Storm Boys add 1 to the hit roll, and he also chips in with the Vulture's Claws with 6 attacks at strength 8 and damage 2. If you do decide to deep strike him, which I'm not sure is necessarily the best idea with his good movement, he does at least get to reroll charge rolls on the turn that he comes in, so I suppose with a 9-inch charge that's around about a coin flip chance to get into combat. Maybe not the worst odds if you can drop him somewhere that's not going to just get immediately gunned down by the enemy. Overall does look solidly usable, definitely something that the Storm Boys would like, provided the points cost is right. Next up, Zogrod Wartsnagger can lead Gretchen. He's the character Runterd with the mad hair. He's been a bit tankier on his profile with a 6+ feel no pain as with Beast Snaggers and a regular 5+ save. He also gains an extra attack with his Grab Zapper as well, 5 attacks at strength 7, AP 2 and damage 2, which really isn't too bad melee threat at all. Previously, in the 9th edition codex, I felt kind of disappointed by just how weedy his Super Gretchen were. His lore is that he basically breeds and trains Gretchen and turns them into his own little grot army, which was kind of at odds with his previous datasheet, where he basically just didn't really do any buffs for them that was actually anything interesting. Now though, his super runts really are super. They get scouts 9 inches, so you can have them move into the mid-board straight away to gun them up with 20 bodies if you want. They get +1 to hit and wound with their attacks, admittedly either strength 2 or strength 3, so not all that much. A -1 to wound against them, which again is still going to be wounded easily on a toughness of 2. And they also get a +6-inch movement during the Waaagh, so they move even faster than the regular boys. Realistically, I'd be kind of surprised if they're any sort of decent damage dealing still. AP 0 still means that they won't be doing much against anything but light infantry, but if they can find some suitable targets, looks like they wouldn't do too bad. I feel like it's just kind of interesting to have a whole bunch of Gretchen just move straight into the midfield right from the start of the game, particularly ones that are just a little bit harder to kill. That could be quite a lot of objective control points on objectives. Next up, we've got Mozrog Scragbad, the unique beast boss on a Squigosaur, and the Snakebite character. Broadly speaking, he's just a slightly upgraded version of the beast boss on the Squigosaur, maybe a little bit more focused on personal combat stats. His defensive profile is fairly similar. He also has the 4+ feel no pain, toughness 10 and 9 wounds. He does get a 4+ invulnerable save though, which I think is quite big with that kind of defensive profile. Otherwise, he gets better melee, big chomper, his unique squig gets damage 4 on those big attacks, plus he even gets critical wounds on a 5+ for the devastating wounds on the charge as well, so a good chance for 4 mortal wounds there. His Gut Ripper attacks strike at damage 3, so a lot more punchy than the standard squig boss there. And he's got a special rule called the bigger they is, the harder they fall. If he's fighting against monsters and vehicles, then you get a +1 to your damage characteristic, and if you're fighting against Titanic units, then that goes up to a +2. Really quite big on Big Chomper's jaws there. That could be the potential for flat 6 mortal wounds, or very nice if he wants to take down a really big prey. Definitely seems interesting versus the regular squig boss, provided the points premium that he pays isn't too steep. Captain Badrock, the Orc piratey captain of the freebooters, is looking a bit better as well, I think. I think his 9th edition profile was truly underwhelming. The Ripper was almost barely worth overcharging due to doing about as much damage to him as it did to the enemy. Now though, with the change to the hazardous rule, it does look a bit better. It's definitely a bit less punishing now you're not making 3 damage rolls rather than 1, and you can command point reroll it if you'd roll a dreaded 1 and risk taking 3 mortal wounds. In general, the upgraded profile is probably worth it though, mainly because of his special rule, which means that with the flash kit when he's leading a unit, you get to reroll the hit roll at range. It's a massively powerful rule to make the flash kits better, who are going to be hitting on a 4+ at best. The damage boost will be 50% if they're hitting on 4s, or even higher than that hitting on 5s. He also even comes with another bonus special rule that's kind of fun. Dead glowy ammo gives an aura of -1 toughness to enemy infantry units nearby. Almost feels like Contagions of Nurgle, but for Mr. Badrock there, and it could make enemy infantry a bit easier to light up with your snaz guns. Quite nice to see that he's got an actual buff that really seems very meaningful on flash kit shooting. The previous reroll ones just wasn't particularly exciting. Finally, we've got the deranged pain boy that is Mad Doc Grotznick. He can lead the same ones as the regular pain boys, burner boys, tank busters, looters, or knobs. He's basically like a pain boy but a little bit more combat focused, strikes with a few more attacks and sustained hits on his unique power claw, gets a 5+ invulnerable save, and rather than either reviving slain models or getting a bonus attack with a syringe, he instead has the option to allow a unit to fall back and charge. Quite a nice situational thing to have. Again, perhaps most interesting on either boys or knobs, I suppose. I'm not realistically sure whether or not the combat buffs though are necessarily worth passing up that grot orderly, with a chance to maybe restore D3 slain knobs to the unit. That does seem very powerful. Overall, plenty of interesting stuff for the Orky characters, I think. A lot of them seem to have a bit more of a niche than they had before, maybe. I do quite like the way that Zagstruck gets a +1 to hit on his Storm Boys now, makes him quite tempting. I think the durability upgrades of the Pain Boy and the Big Mech in the Mega Armor look kind of interesting for their squads. And perhaps the Weird Boy could be kind of fun, jumping units around the board, and also getting the +2 to charge with the Stratagem for some reliable charges. With the characters talked about, that looks like that brings us to the end of our summary of Index Orcs for Warhammer 40K 10th edition. Overall, I feel like there's some good stuff here, some things that are a bit more underwhelming maybe. I think that Boys on Foot will look quite nice with 6-inch movement and a 5+ armor save now. Gretchen are looking kind of fun to park on objectives and just farm up some command points, plus have really quite a lot of objective control. I feel like the other specialist boys like Commandos and Storm Boys are still going to be very interesting indeed. Perhaps a few of the vehicle datasheets aren't sounding like they've had amazing improvements. The flyers in particular I think seem kind of underwhelming, and I'd be sort of surprised if the Gorkanauts and Stomper wound up being in any way efficient. They just don't have a good track record for that kind of thing. Obviously, when we get points costs, we'll be able to weigh these up a little bit more. Should be coming out within the next 24 hours in theory, according to Games Workshop. Will be interesting to see what sort of things are strong or weak for the Orcs, and I'm sure I'll follow this up with a tier list of Orc units at some stage. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, or I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new ones just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description below if you'd like to help support. Channel patrons are what allow me to keep on making big videos like this really quite so often, and if you are enjoying a lot, any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.